there is nothing new in Wall Street. There can't be, because speculation is as old as the hills. Jesse Livermore, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin with a confession. I'm not here to teach you how to trade like Jesse Livermore. That man made and lost fortunes before most of us could spell speculation. No, today I want to talk about something far more valuable. How to think like Jesse Livermore. Because while his trades made headlines, it was his mind that made history. Jesse Livermore once said, "There is nothing new in Wall Street because speculation is as old as the hills." This statement carries a depth far beyond the surface of trading. When he said that, he wasn't merely talking about stock prices or trading patterns. He was describing human behavior, the very essence of the market. To Livermore, the market was not a machine of numbers and charts, it was a living reflection of humanity itself. He believed that the market is a mirror that reflects the emotions, the psychology, and the behavior of every participant involved. Every price movement, every spike or crash, every trend or reversal is simply an expression of human nature in motion. Thinking like Jesse Livermore begins with this understanding. The market does not reward intelligence alone, nor does it punish ignorance by itself. It rewards emotional control and punishes emotional excess. When fear takes hold, prices fall. When greed dominates, prices soar. And yet, underneath all of this, the market itself remains neutral. It simply mirrors the collective state of mind of those who trade within it. This is why Livermore insisted that successful speculation was not about studying the market, but about studying oneself. If you can understand your own tendencies toward fear and greed, then you can begin to understand the crowd, because the crowd is made up of people just like you. Livermore's genius was his ability to step outside that crowd. He saw what others were doing, but more importantly, he understood why they were doing it. He once observed that people repeat the same mistakes in every generation because human nature never changes. That insight is timeless. Markets evolve, technologies shift, but the underlying psychology remains constant. Traders today have access to faster data and complex algorithms, but they still fall prey to the same emotional traps that plagued speculators in Livermore's time. Overconfidence after a winning streak, panic after a loss, and the eternal hope that this time will be different. To think like Livermore is to realize that the market is not your opponent. Your emotions are. Prices rise and fall not because the universe conspires against you, but because countless individuals are reacting to fear, greed, and uncertainty, just as you might. Livermore learned that lesson the hard way. He made and lost several fortunes throughout his life, not because he lacked knowledge, but because at times even he fell victim to the emotional forces he warned others about. Yet each time he returned, wiser and more self-aware, refining his understanding of the mirror that the market held up to him. When you begin to view the market through Livermore's lens, you start to notice patterns not just in prices but in behavior. You see the optimism that inflates bubbles and the despair that fuels crashes. You recognize that what appears irrational on the surface is actually the logical outcome of collective emotion. This perspective gives you a calm center in the midst of chaos. Instead of reacting to every fluctuation, you learn to observe. You realize that when others are fearful, opportunity often lies hidden beneath the panic. When others are euphoric, danger often lurks behind the excitement. Livermore's thinking was grounded in this psychological awareness. But the idea that the market is a mirror extends beyond trading. It applies to business, leadership, and even personal growth. Every environment we operate in reflects our mindset. If you approach life from a place of fear, you will see threats everywhere. If you approach it with confidence and patience, you will notice opportunities that others overlook. Livermore's way of thinking encourages self-reflection. To ask not, what is the market doing? But rather, what am I feeling and why? This shift from external observation to internal awareness is what separates the average trader from the great one, the reactive thinker from the reflective one. In Livermore's world, the key to success was emotional balance. He understood that markets rise and fall in cycles because people rise and fall in emotion. By mastering yourself, you gain a kind of vision that goes beyond numbers. You begin to sense the rhythm of the market, the pulse of collective psychology. You stop being swayed by rumors, noise, or the crowd's hysteria. You become the observer, not the participant in the frenzy. And that, in Livermore's mind, was the ultimate advantage. So when we say the market is a mirror, what we truly mean is that it reflects the unchanging patterns of human nature. Technology may evolve, strategies may grow more complex, but the forces of fear and greed remain eternal. Livermore knew that anyone could learn to read charts or follow trends, but very few could learn to read themselves. That is why, even a century later, his lessons endure, not because of the trades he made, but because of the truth he uncovered to understand the market. You must first understand the person staring back at you from the mirror. Jesse Livermore built his legacy not merely on market intuition, but on an iron discipline that separated him from the ordinary speculator. He understood that trading, like life, rewards restraint more than impulse. His rule, cut your losses quickly and let your profits run, was not just a trading maxim, it was a philosophy for decision-making. Discipline, for Livermore, was the foundation of all success. Without it, intelligence, experience, and even luck become meaningless. He knew that the greatest threat to any trader wasn't the market's volatility but their own emotions. Impatience, overconfidence, and the desire to be right rather than to be profitable. To Livermore, discipline meant control. Control of action, control of thought, and above all, control of emotion. The market is a place of constant temptation. It whispers promises of easy money and quick wins. It tests your nerve every hour of every day. Livermore saw countless traders lose fortunes not because they lacked knowledge, but because they lacked the self-control to follow their own rules. They held on to losing positions hoping for a turnaround, or they sold winners too soon, afraid to lose unrealized gains. He once said that the desire for constant action irrespective of underlying conditions is responsible for many losses on Wall Street. That insight cuts to the core of human weakness. Most people feel the need to always be doing something, buying, selling, reacting. But Livermore understood that the real skill lies in doing nothing when nothing should be done. The principle of cutting losses quickly is rooted in humility. It is an acknowledgement that being wrong is not a failure, but a fact of life. Livermore accepted that no one, not even the most skilled trader, could predict the market all the time. The key, he believed, was not to be right often but to make the most when right and lose the least when wrong. Cutting losses early protects both capital and confidence. It's a psychological reset, a way of clearing emotional clutter before it grows into financial disaster. Letting profits run, on the other hand, demands patience and courage. It means trusting your judgment, allowing success to unfold naturally, and resisting the urge to snatch quick rewards. Discipline is what bridges these two extremes, knowing when to stop and when to hold on. In Livermore's life, discipline was not a theory, it was tested repeatedly. He experienced some of the greatest financial victories of his era, but also devastating collapses that wiped out entire fortunes. Each failure, however, reinforced his commitment to discipline. He realized that every major loss began with a single small mistake, a moment of emotional weakness, a deviation from his rules. He learned that consistency in behavior was far more powerful than brilliance in analysis. The disciplined trader could survive bad luck, while the undisciplined one would destroy himself even in good markets. Discipline also meant isolation. Livermore operated best when he was alone, free from the noise of other opinions. He distrusted tips, rumors, and the excitement of crowds. He preferred clarity over chaos. This mental solitude allowed him to stick to his strategy even when others panicked or celebrated. It takes enormous inner strength to act contrary to the crowd, especially when the crowd seems to be winning. Yet Livermore believed that discipline is not tested in comfort. It is tested in crisis. When markets fall and fear spreads, the disciplined thinker stays composed, rational, and focused. In modern times, Livermore's lesson on discipline applies beyond the trading floor. In business, leadership, and even personal growth, success often depends on doing what is difficult, not what is easy. The discipline to stick with a long-term vision, to resist distractions, and to maintain composure under pressure is what distinguishes those who endure from those who merely react. Every goal, whether financial, professional, or personal, requires the same unwavering control that Livermore practiced in his trades. To think like Jesse Livermore is to understand that discipline is freedom, the freedom from chaos, from emotion, and from regret. It allows you to act with clarity rather than impulse. It replaces fear with confidence and confusion with structure. The disciplined mind can wait patiently for opportunity, strike decisively when it appears, and step back without hesitation when the odds turn unfavorable. Livermore's wisdom reminds us that markets may change, methods may evolve, but the principle of discipline remains eternal. Success in any field is not a matter of constant action but of consistent control. It is the quiet strength to follow your plan while others lose theirs. Jesse Livermore was not just a trader. He was a thinker who understood the immense power of independence in a world driven by crowds. His entire philosophy rested on one essential truth: if you think like everyone else, you will lose like everyone else. To Livermore, independent thinking was not arrogance. It was survival. He knew that markets move not by logic but by emotion, and that the crowd is almost always wrong at turning points. He observed that the majority buy when the market feels safe and sell when it feels dangerous. Precisely the opposite of what success requires. To think like Livermore, therefore, is to cultivate a mind that can stand alone, a mind that trusts its own observation more than the comfort of consensus. Livermore once said, "The game taught me the game, and it didn't spare me the rod while teaching." This quote captures the essence of independent thought. No teacher, no mentor, and no book could replace direct experience. He believed that every trader must go through the process of learning through their own successes and failures, because true understanding cannot be borrowed. It must be earned. Independent thinking means accepting the loneliness of responsibility, the courage to act without validation from others. The crowd seeks reassurance, the independent thinker seeks truth. Livermore's path was not easy, but it was clear: observe, analyze, and decide for yourself, no matter how uncomfortable that may be. This principle was visible in how Livermore approached speculation. He had little interest in market gossip or inside tips. He once saw the most expensive information a trader could ever buy because they robbed a person of independent judgment. Following others' opinions blinds you to your own reasoning. It creates dependency, and dependency breeds weakness. Livermore was a student of behavior, not just of prices, but of the people who influenced them. He understood that when everyone is thinking the same, no one is truly thinking at all. His success came from noticing what others ignored, from seeing patterns others dismissed, and from having the conviction to act when others froze in doubt. Independent thinking, however, does not mean stubbornness. Livermore was not attached to being right. He was committed to being objective. He was willing to change his mind when the facts changed. That distinction is crucial. Independence does not mean fighting the market or resisting the truth. It means staying loyal to evidence over emotion. He believed in following what he called the line of least resistance, the direction in which the market naturally wanted to move. This wasn't guesswork or defiance, it was disciplined observation. He didn't impose his will on the market, he let the market reveal its will to him. Independent thinking, in Livermore's sense, was not about rebellion. It was about clarity. To think independently also means to embrace solitude. Livermore often traded in isolation, far from the noise of other speculators. He needed silence to think clearly. The market is loud, not only with numbers and news, but with the constant chatter of fear and hope. In that noise, most people lose themselves. Livermore knew that true insight comes from stillness, from the ability to listen to your own mind without interference. That's why he often warned against emotional contagion, the tendency to absorb the crowd's mood. He realized that once you start thinking like the majority, your fate becomes tied to theirs. Independence, then, is not just a strategy but a form of emotional protection. In the modern world, Livermore's message is more relevant than ever. We live in an age of information overload. Opinions, predictions, and forecasts come at us from every direction. The temptation to follow the majority, to act based on trends or social validation, is stronger than ever. Yet, as Livermore would remind us, information is useless without interpretation, and interpretation is worthless without independent thought. It is not what you know, but how you think, that determines your outcome. The courage to question, to doubt the obvious, to stand firm when others waver, that is the hallmark of Livermore's mindset. Independent thinking also carries a certain humility. It requires you to accept that no one can predict the future with certainty, not even you. Livermore's independence came from respect for reality, not from ego. He did not try to control the market, he tried to understand it. That humility kept him alert, flexible, and grounded even when others were blinded by greed or fear. His thinking reminds us that the goal is not to be right all the time, but to think clearly when it matters most. In essence, Jesse Livermore's independence of thought was the invisible weapon behind his legendary reputation. It was not a gift he was born with, but a discipline he cultivated. The ability to see without bias, to think without fear, and to act without needing approval. His mind was his greatest tool, and he guarded it from contamination by the crowd. To think like him is to stand apart in a world that rewards conformity. It is to build confidence not from the noise of others, but from the quiet conviction of your own reasoning. Livermore's life teaches us that true independence is not a position, it is a mindset, a way of seeing the world that places truth above comfort and wisdom above popularity. Jesse Livermore believed that the greatest edge a trader could ever possess was not speed, not secrecy, and not even superior analysis. It was observation. He once said, "It was never my thinking that made the big money for me. It was always my sitting." In those words lies a profound truth: the art of waiting, watching, and allowing the market to reveal its intentions before acting. Observation, for Livermore, was not a passive state. It was an active discipline. It required patience, awareness, and restraint, three qualities that few possess and even fewer can maintain under pressure. To think like Jesse Livermore is to understand that insight comes not from constant action but from deliberate stillness. Livermore saw the market as a living organism, unpredictable in the short term but patterned in the long run. He spent hours, even days, observing price movements before making a single trade. This wasn't because he doubted himself, it was because he respected the complexity of the market. He realized that every move carried meaning. Behind each rise and fall were emotions, fear, greed, and hope, playing out in patterns that repeated throughout history. The more he observed, the more he recognized that markets behave like people, and people behave predictably under certain emotional pressures. Observation allowed him to detect when enthusiasm was turning into mania or when despair was giving way to opportunity. He wasn't chasing prices, he was reading behavior. In today's fast-paced world, where speed and constant reaction are celebrated, Livermore's approach feels almost radical, but his success was proof that the observer always has the upper hand over the reactor. Most traders, driven by impatience, jump into the market at the first sign of movement. They confuse motion with progress and activity with intelligence. Livermore saw through this illusion. He understood that observation provides perspective, the ability to distinguish meaningful trends from random noise. By sitting back and watching, he allowed others to reveal their intentions. When the crowd rushed in blindly, he quietly took note. When they panicked, he measured their fear. This detached perspective gave him clarity when others were clouded by emotion. Observation for Livermore was not merely about watching prices. It was about timing, waiting for the market to confirm what he already suspected. He often spoke of the line of least resistance, the direction in which the market naturally wanted to move. Finding that line required careful observation of patterns, volume, and momentum. He didn't guess where the market should go, he waited to see where it was going. Once he identified that direction, he would act decisively, and then, just as importantly, he would return to watching. This rhythm of observation and action, followed by renewed observation, was his way of staying in sync with the market's rhythm instead of fighting against it. But the power of observation extends beyond trading. It is a mindset, a way of understanding the world. Observation requires patience in a culture addicted to speed, silence in a world filled with noise, and reflection in a time of reaction. Livermore's discipline teaches that wisdom often arrives not through doing more, but through noticing more. Observation gives birth to understanding, and understanding gives birth to timing, the single most critical factor in success. Whether in markets, business, or personal life, timing is everything, and timing comes only to those who are patient enough to observe before they act. Livermore's life offers vivid examples of this principle. Before some of his greatest trades, such as his legendary short positions before the 1907 and 1929 crashes, he waited quietly as the rest of the market became increasingly euphoric. He didn't fight the trend, he watched it unfold. He noticed the subtle signs, exaggerated optimism, excessive margin buying, the feeling that nothing could go wrong. These were not numbers on a chart, they were emotions in motion. And when he finally acted, he did so with confidence, because his decision was grounded in observation, not speculation. This approach required immense emotional control. Observation is difficult precisely because it feels like inaction. The human mind craves movement, decisions, and results. To sit and wait feels unproductive, even painful. But Livermore knew that impatience destroys more capital than bad analysis ever could. Observation demands faith, faith in your process, in your preparation, and in the idea that opportunities reveal themselves in time, not through force. At its core, Livermore's philosophy of observation reminds us that the most valuable information often comes not from what is said, but from what is left unsaid, not from what the crowd does, but from how it reacts. Observation is the ability to see beneath the surface, to recognize patterns before they become obvious, to sense mood before it shifts, and to detect weakness beneath apparent strength. It transforms randomness into rhythm, chaos into insight. To think like Jesse Livermore is to cultivate the art of watchfulness. To trade less but see more, to speak less but understand more, to act less often but with greater conviction. His legacy teaches that opportunity is not something we chase, it's something we notice. And in that stillness, in that moment of patient observation, lies the clarity that turns experience into wisdom, and wisdom into success. Jesse Livermore often said that the market is never wrong, only opinions are. Within that statement lies one of his most profound insights. The real struggle in speculation and indeed in life is not against the market, the economy, or external forces. The real battle is always within oneself. Livermore understood that no chart, rule, or formula could protect a trader who had not mastered his own emotions. He witnessed countless men lose fortunes not because the market tricked them, but because they deceived themselves, blinded by greed, paralyzed by fear, or corrupted by pride. To think like Jesse Livermore, therefore, is to understand that your greatest enemy is not outside you, it lives within you. Livermore's experiences were a lifelong duel with human nature, his own and everyone else's. He made and lost fortunes several times, and each cycle taught him the same lesson in a deeper way: success demands emotional balance. He knew that discipline, patience, and courage were not traits you are born with, they are muscles built through struggle. Every trader faces moments of doubt, temptation, and overconfidence. The difference between survival and ruin lies in how one responds to those moments. Livermore believed that those who cannot control their emotions will eventually hand their wealth and their peace of mind to those who can. This idea reaches far beyond trading. Every decision we make in life carries an emotional component. Fear urges us to stay safe, greed tempts us to overreach, hope blinds us to reality, and pride keeps us from admitting mistakes. Livermore saw these emotions play out daily in the markets, where they appeared amplified and ruthless. But he also saw that the same forces shape every human endeavor. To think like him is to view self-mastery as the foundation of all mastery. Whether you are a trader, an entrepreneur, or a leader, the ability to regulate your emotions determines your ability to succeed. Livermore's rule, cut your losses quickly, was not merely a trading tactic, it was a moral discipline. It meant having the humility to admit when you were wrong and the courage to act on that realization. Most people hesitate to do so because admitting defeat feels painful. They hold on to losing positions and losing ideas. Because of ego, Livermore learned that the moment you begin to defend a mistake, you stop growing. The true professional, he said, never argues with the market. He listens, adapts, and moves on. That attitude requires enormous inner strength, the kind that only self-awareness can build. Livermore also understood that emotional control is not about suppressing feelings, but about understanding them. Fear and greed will always exist, they cannot be erased. What matters is how you respond to them. He observed that those who panic in downturns or grow reckless in booms are not victims of the market, but of their own unmanaged emotions. To him, every fluctuation in price was a reflection of the collective emotional state of traders, a mirror of human psychology. The key was to see that mirror clearly without becoming part of its reflection. That clarity of mind, the ability to watch emotions rise and fall without being controlled by them, is what made Livermore exceptional. To think like Jesse Livermore also means accepting that self-mastery is a lifelong pursuit. Even he, a man of legendary discipline, admitted that emotions sometimes overcame him. There were times when he ignored his own rules and paid dearly for it. Yet instead of blaming the market, he turned inward, asking what weakness in himself had allowed that error. This habit of reflection, of taking responsibility rather than seeking excuses, was one of his greatest strengths. He once remarked, "A man must believe in himself and his judgment if he expects to make a living at this game." That belief was not blind arrogance, but the confidence that comes from self-understanding. The battle within is the most difficult because it is invisible. The market gives instant feedback, but our emotions operate in silence, manipulating our thoughts without our awareness. Livermore trained himself to notice these internal signals. The excitement after a gain, the anxiety for a loss, the impatience before a trade. He knew that these feelings were not random, they were warnings, clues to his mental state. By paying attention to them, he could step back before making costly mistakes. This kind of emotional intelligence, long before the term existed, was central to his philosophy. Beyond the trading floor, Livermore's insight applies to anyone striving for excellence. In business, sports, or personal growth, the same emotional traps appear. Success can make us overconfident, failure can make us timid. Livermore's mindset reminds us that balance is the key. The individual who can stay calm when others panic, who can think clearly when others are confused, who can act rationally amid chaos, that person will always have an advantage. Ultimately, Jesse Livermore's greatest lesson is that mastery of the mind precedes mastery of the market. Wealth, fame, and fortune are fleeting, character endures. The external world will always test your patience, your beliefs, and your resilience, but victory belongs to those who win the internal battle first. To think like Livermore is to approach every challenge with self-awareness, to question your motives before your moves, and to remember that success is not about conquering others or predicting the future. It is about conquering yourself. When you learn to control your emotions, you no longer fear uncertainty, because you realize that no matter what happens outside, you remain steady inside. That, as Livermore showed through both triumph and tragedy, is the highest form of wisdom, the victory of mind over market and of self over circumstance. Here's a powerful closing hook written the tone and philosophy of Jesse Livermore, poetic, reflective, and motivational, to perfectly conclude your speech. How to think like Jesse Livermore, not trade like him. The real key to success. Jesse Livermore once said, emotional control. If intelligence were the key, there would be a lot more wealthy people. And that is the essence of his legacy. To think like Jesse Livermore is not to memorize his trades, but to embody his mindset. To see clearly when others are blinded by emotion, to wait when others rush, to act with reason when others react in fear. He understood that the market, and life itself, is a mirror, reflecting not what we wish to see, but who we truly are. And until we learn to master the reflection staring back at us, we can never master the world around us. So, as you step forward, into the market, into business, into life, remember this: you don't have to trade like Jesse Livermore. You only have to think like him, with patience, independence, and an unshakable belief in your own discipline. Because in the end, the greatest profit you'll ever earn is not measured in dollars. It's measured in the calm confidence of a mind you have mastered. Thank you.